Hi everyone, welcome to the UI and UX workshop. My name is also Jacqui, and Yianna will be presenting with me today. So next slide, please. Awesome. So a bit about us and why we qualified to talk about UI and UX. So as I said, my name is Jacqui, and I'm a software engineer at Atlassian. I graduated from RMIT in 2018. From a computer science degree, but before that actually studied design and spent some time as a designer before transitioning into software development. So it's still very much a part of my life. And, you know, I think having some skill in UI and UX makes you a better software developer in the end as well. So I'll pass it over to Yianna to introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Jacqui. Hi, everyone. Yeah, you're probably thinking a security engineer is doing UI UX, but it's funny, Jacqui and I actually have pretty similar career paths. We both started in design. I did a digital media design degree, and I loved 3D, and I loved psychology and learning all about, you know, how to make things look good. And shortly after, I co-founded a business that was about web hosting and web development, and I led the creative side. But I realized there was always a problem, like trying to talk to the engineers about what I wanted to get built. So I thought, why don't I just learn how to do that myself? And then I actually studied a Bachelor of Computer Science at RMIT just a few years after that, and that was awesome. That's where I also tutored things like user-centered design and web development. Projects were amazing. Like, I loved seeing students' work come to life. So that's why I'm here now. I've been at Seek for about 2 years. I started as a software developer, and I use a lot of my UX experience to develop processes and tools and software for our engineers at Seek. I'll pass it back to you, Jacqui.
Thanks, Yianna. Yeah, thank you, Jacqui, for being on point with the slides. So what are we doing today in the next hour or so? What we've got planned for you is I will be walking through, because we understand, you know, we're in a hackathon, you've got limited time to create a product. So I'll be running you through what we think are like kind of some core principles in UI and some, just some resources that will help you get started to start building your product. Then Yianna will go through kind of a 101 for user experience and share some, you know, just like core things that we think are going to be helpful and practical for you to get started with UI and UX. And the main part of this is going to be a follow-along workshop in Figma. So what I've asked in a few of the channels in Discord is if you don't have a Figma account yet, it takes about maybe 5 minutes to set up because you just need to verify your email. So if you just go to figma.com and create an account, that while I'm kind of talking now, that'll help us like move along for when we jump into the workshop. And so our plan for the workshop is actually to go from creating some really basic wireframes together to actually, thanks, Yianna. So Yianna will help you along the way. So we're creating some wireframes and we'll turn that into an interactive prototype where you don't need coding skills to actually have a product by the end of this hackathon. If maybe you're in your first or second year at uni, you can build like a working application in Figma because it's a pretty powerful tool. So we hope, you enjoy that part of the session. And if we've got time, you're always welcome to ask us questions, like even after this, section. And we might get to demos if you want to share what you actually got to build in this workshop. So next slide, please. So what do we hope you get from this session? More practical skills in UI and UX, a bit of a better working knowledge in Figma if you haven't used it before, and really just like some more tools in your toolbox at the end of this session. Awesome. So UI 101, I'll be running this and then I'll hand it over to Yianna. Kind of 3 things I want to walk you through. You might have already done like a course in user-centered design at uni. So I'll try not to make it too lectury, but after we've spoken through kind of some core principles, we'll turn it into like a practical workshop. So next slide, please, Jacqui. So you might have thought to yourself, if you're a software developer or you're studying IT or computer science, that you don't need or you don't have design skills. I do love this picture. I think it portrays it really well to say, well, anyone can, find the tools and the resources to do good design. You don't need to be a designer to, pick up some of the skills needed. So next slide, please. So what is UI design? This is just a definition that I've kind of written as my interpretation of UI design. It's about building user interfaces that your users interact with. And what I've written here is, I think at the back of your mind, as you're designing your product for this hackathon, try to be thinking about 3 core things. And that's that your product is like comfortable to use, it's consistent, so users can kind of know what to expect when they're interacting with your product, and that it is simple, so not overbearing, not too much, information overload. We want to build something that's like a pleasant experience to build. So kind of part 1 of this is layout, and the whole point of layout is to build a visual hierarchy. Next slide, please. When I say this, I'm trying to put into your mind, think about what your user is trying to achieve. Like, for example, is the goal of your product that they actually sign up and donate money? Is it that they buy a product? And think about what the core goal of your product. And with that in mind, that would make the elements on your design the most prominent. You're going to be bringing it to the center of attention for your user. For example, call to action buttons. Next slide. Another part of layout is grouping related elements together. And in a few slides, I'll show you an example of this, but really be thinking about using proximity to show grouped elements together. Next slide. And finally, about layout, and I think this one gets lost sometime, is to give the user some breathing room and some white space. It can be really tempting just to cram as much information into a screen, whether that be like a mobile app or a website. But it's really important to try and leave room for the user to breathe and not overwhelm them as they're using your product. So here's a good example of layout, I would say. It's the ABC website. You might be familiar with it. And the reason I want to kind of highlight this is the way that they've used layout and grouping and just how they use hierarchy, really. So if you can kind of look at this screen, you're kind of drawn straight away to the picture of our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, and how they're using font sizes and proximity to other sections on the page. For example, at the top above Scott Morrison's face, we've got top stories from ABC News, but you're not directed to look at that straight away. So in the back of your mind as you're building, think about where you want your users' eyes to go and build that accordingly. Another good example I like to share is this one. So you can see on the left-hand side, you can see exactly where you should look, and your eyes are directed kind of automatically, right? And from this example, there isn't much variation in color. It's really just tiny little tweaks to your font, to the boldness, and it already makes a huge difference, the left-hand side versus the right. So even small things like that, adding a bit of space, it can really add dynamicness, if that's a word, to your design. So there's another good example of that. So next thing, we've talked about layout really quickly. I want to talk about typography. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. I'll say this quickly, just for your hackathon and for any products you really build, try to limit your fonts to like 1 or 2, maximum 3, because the more you use, the more like you are like diluting your brand. So if you're using, sorry, I'm just going to mute the person that might have some background noise. If you're using 3 fonts, like really be thinking about, why did you choose more than 1 or 2? Like, do you have a good reason for that? And just, yeah, I would say stick to 1 or 2. That's your best bet. Next slide, please. So a concept that I like to share is this thing called font pairing. And it's where you pair a serif font, so the ones that have the little glyphs at the end of them, like Times New Roman, pair that with a sans serif font. So something like Verdana or Helvetica. Sorry, I know I'm saying words, but like one that just like this font on the screen where there aren't any glyphs. And that there's probably been some research into it that they go well together. They complement each other to bring like, you know, a visually interesting product. So have a go at that. And next slide, please. And my recommendation to you is have a look at fontsgooglecom. When we get into the demo, I can show you that there's a way to import fonts without needing to download individual files. You can just import it straight from Google into your HTML, and that gives you a really quick way to get started with using different fonts. So, next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, this is my last slides on UI design, is about colors. So again, I would recommend that you stick to a limited color palette. Next slide, please. 3 to 4 is my recommendation. Next slide. And just say you've got your 4 colors. If you need to use more in your design, have a go at using different shades of those 4 colors rather than like picking new colors, because again, just like typography, it starts to like dilute your brand, and by limiting them, you're going to build a stronger product at the end of the day. So. Another thing to talk about quickly is accessibility. So there are a few tools online. If you Google accessible colors. I don't remember the exact name of the tool. We can have a look in the workshop, but just make sure you're thinking about the contrast of your background against your foreground colors, because there are some people like myself, like bad vision, where some colors are considered non-accessible to certain users. And if you design first, this is something that Yianna told me, is like design first for accessibility, that will be a better product for everyone at the end of the day. So. And finally, some recommended tools. You might have seen these already. There's coolers.co and the Canva color palette as ways to easily generate like a color palette without having to do, you know, the work yourself to find the shades and the hex codes for the CSS. So have a look at those as well. Awesome. So that was a quick run through. I'm going to hand it over to Yianna now to talk about UX.
Thanks, Jacqui. My headset just died, so that's good timing on my part. Can you all hear me okay? Awesome. Right. Let's jump into user experience. Next slide, please. So let's think about the user. They're really central. I love user-centered design because that's really who is going to be the one that you're taking on a journey. And think of yourself as their guide. So you want to do the right thinking up front to help create focus, to give that user the best experience of the journey as possible. Next slide, please. So Norman door metaphor, this is a classic example that helps build a conceptual framework, or like a mental model in your mind about how to think of the user experience. If you have to explain how to use a door, it's not good design. And further to that, if you have a design for a door that is exactly the same, but they do different things, ask yourself, is that good design? So break down the Norman door and we sort of analyze it. We think, well, what's the purpose for this? What's the vision of the door? Is this just an object as part of the building? So it's one part of a bigger system. Is the door going to be like your entry point? Do you need to excite people and entice them into going there? Or is it an exit point? What are the design considerations that you need to put around that? The only way you can think of those design considerations is to really break down how people are going to use this door, how you'll communicate using that door, and why. So if we expand that framework to think about, well, this door helps us achieve a goal, and that's to enter or exit a building. So if we build on top of that, I think if you go to our next slide. So we've spoken about that purpose of vision. Once you start to build on top of that, next slide, you think about the target audience. And every time you think of any sort of design element or how this door might be designed, you think, who is going to be using this? Is it going to need to be a door that is used quickly? Is it a door to a hospital? Or is it going to be attached to an eco building? Does it serve a purpose that is greater than the one of just exiting and entering? If you go to the next slide, please. And then you think about those user needs as well. So a user need could be, does the door handle need to be a certain height? Are people in wheelchairs? Is it a door for children, or do we want to prevent people of children trying to open that door? So you can start to think, oh, okay, if I was to put a handle on that, we want to prevent children from using it. Do we put that handle higher? Okay, you've done that. But what happens if someone in a wheelchair tries to access that handle? Have you now made it too high for them? So if we just go to the next slide. So again, a door, it seems simple, but if you need to put a sign and if it does different things, you're not communicating your message very well. Next slide, please. And don't do this. This is the cheap option. Does it push? I don't know. But even the other day, I was using my VR headset and I noticed that there was a sticker peeling off, and I hadn't noticed a sticker before. What I realized was that the controllers look exactly the same, apart from the fact that the inside buttons of that controller like point inwards. So one will be for your left hand and one will be for your right hand. And every time I pick them up, I'm like which one's for which hand again? So the cheap option they chose, because it must have been an afterthought, was to put a sticker on top of it. But the sticker is placed where my palm is. And so that sticker is peeled off. And now every time I pick up these controllers, it's going through that same thought process, that friction of, oh God, is it left or right? This is a pain. And I'm already in VR. We want to try to reduce that as much as possible. So if we go to the next slide. So I really like this image. Jacqui added this slide, and I thought you want something to be useful, usable, and desirable. And when those things converge, that's when you have an experience that is fully realized, like it's fully thought out. This can be applied to your front-end design, the prototypes that we'll be talking about and showing you how to make soon. But it can also be applied to the design of your APIs and your software. So I've used APIs from various companies such as AWS. I absolutely hate their documentation because their teams are so fragmented that there's no standard. There's no standard of documentation. And often when you're iterating and you're trying to move fast, that documentation gets outdated very quickly. So you need to come up with solutions that make your APIs clear for the user, the developers, and try to reduce that friction. Because ideally, the target audience for an API are the developers that are building for it, and you want to entice as many developers as possible. So it's not just about the design of how something looks on the outside, like UI, like we're talking about today, but you can also apply this thinking in your processes and your software design. Next slide. Yeah, I'd love to bring your attention to Humane by Design. This is a website. The link is at the bottom. I should link that in the Discord as well. And this is a fantastic resource for how we as tech people can start thinking about humane digital products. So building digital products that have ethics and our ethical values thought about from the beginning. There's quite a few on this website, so I implore you to have a look at it, but I'd like to bring your attention to a few of these. And the first one is being finite. Next slide, please. So what do I mean by finite? Well, there's a couple of examples here where, I don't know if you've been on some feeds where they've got infinite scrolling. So it continues to load more, load more. This is to entice the user to make sure that they stay on that website. I've heard like Twitter being described as doom scrolling because you're just there in, like up until 3 a.m. you're still scrolling that feed. But think about the user. Are we really thinking about the user's mental health here? Is this the best way for the user to be interacting with your product? And I think this comes down to the fact that many companies are driven by money. And yes, money helps our economy go round. But if we don't have a healthy user base to then use our products, how can we then ensure that we're making money for the long term? So I want you to think about this way to sort of bring your user through a journey, but also help them to close that journey off for a little bit of time, have some rest, and then come back to it. The next one that I'd like to talk about is being inclusive, and this is probably the one like closest to me. Is I strongly believe we should always be designing for disabilities and accessibility first. And you can only do that if you have a diverse team. So you need a team with so many different experiences. And that could be, as said, disability. I myself only recently diagnosed I'm autistic, and I didn't know this my whole life. And I see that as a superpower. That's awesome. If I had known that, like there have been so many experiences in my life that could have been made better. And I think that us as people designing solutions, we can make this better for people as well. I'll tell you a little bit of a story of the curb cut effect. So the curb cut effect, if you can imagine a curb, so you've got a road, a footpath, and the curb is a bit of a step. So you have to stand onto that curb. That's okay for able-bodied people. We've got legs, we can walk, and we can step onto that. But when we cut that curb, when we make it a slope, so if we think of a driveway where a car can sort of go up onto it smoothly, we suddenly start to make that a bit more accessible. So let's say we designed that because we have a shopping centre and we have people with shopping carts trying to push a trolley. They're going to smash into a curb. But if you cut it and you make it a slope, people can then, use their trolleys. But now you're also benefiting people who might have a stroller or like a pram with a child inside, and they no longer have to like get up this step. They can just smoothly go on. What about someone in a wheelchair? So if we're thinking about accessibility first, you're actually making a better product for everyone to use. Next slide, please. Transparency. So as a security engineer, this is like a really big ethical one for me. You want to make your app and the terms and conditions of your app as transparent as possible. So I know a lot of people joke about the terms and conditions, and we accept them and say yes. And I feel like those were purposely designed to be long and to be arduous to go through so that people weren't actually paying attention and reading. And that has had a lot of scrutiny to the point where a lot of companies are mandated to have very easy to understand terms and conditions. The other thing I want you to think about is the data that you're collecting. Why are you collecting this data? What do you actually need it for? So there are a few things that sometimes designers come to me with, and they want to find things out, such as a person's date of birth. I ask, why do you need to know that? Is it for demographic purposes? Are you targeting a certain thing that is for a specific age group? Is it because you want to try to limit like the age of who is using your website? For instance, you might not want anyone under 18 to be using it. The other one is gender. We ask about gender all the time, but what does this information actually give us? If we really break this down and we think about what people's likes and dislikes are, is it gender that you're trying to find out, or is it if it's a medical app, perhaps what is important that you know what kind of anatomy that person has. So as we start to form questions around like who the users are and what kind of information we collect, I think we can actually ask the questions we really want to know, rather than just a blanket statement of the binary, like male, female genders, because we know much better now, like that isn't the case in society. And also the right to be forgotten. I think it's important that a user is empowered and has the right to let the company know that they don't want you to have their data anymore, and that should be okay. Our privacy should be pretty important. That's the end of my section, so I'm going to pass it back over to Jacqui.
Thanks, Yianna. I really like that you shared Humane by Design. I had not heard of it until today, and it's definitely worth looking at the website because they've got a few more points on there as well. So before we jump into the workshop, there's one more section I'd like to walk you through, and that is loafly. So what is loafly? Next slide, please. It should explain it better than I can talk about it. Oh, sorry, next slide. Thank you, Jacqui. So loafly is an app that I designed for myself. I like to bake in my spare time, and I want to use this as an example of the UX design process. So sorry, Jacqui, if you go back one slide and I can explain it a bit better. So Adrian asked earlier in a session where everyone jumped into Yianna's voice chat about like, what's the process next? We've got our idea. How do we begin to, get started? And I think it's a great talking point. So I pulled this image from Google just by searching UX design process, and you'll find a lot of variations of this on like a linear scale. And so you've got empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And I want to kind of talk you through the process that I went through to develop Loafly, the baking app, using these steps. So if you jump 2 slides, Jacqui. Okay. Great. So the first one is empathize, and it's all about putting yourself into your user's shoes. So with Loafly, it was a bit easier for me because like I like to bake. So I'm like, okay, I am my user. But you want to be trying to think about what kind of problems are your users facing every day, and have you actually faced them yourself? Because that will put you in a good position to, try and help solve that problem in a way that, is unique to you. Next slide. So next one is about actually defining that problem. And this, I think, is, one of the hardest parts because it's like, okay, I want to build something cool, but am I actually solving a problem, or am I just building something cool because, for fun? And so I would say in this case, talking about Loafly, the problem was that when I bake bread, I like to write down how much flour I use, how much water, how much you spend time letting the bread rise. And there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And I was writing all this down manually, on paper, sometimes using notes on my iPhone. And it was really unorganized, and I didn't have a good way to track it. So Loafly came into my mind as an idea that could solve that problem. And I could do it in a systematic way, and that would actually help me become a better baker. That was the problem I was trying to solve. And one thing I want to say about this quickly is, so when I was doing user research, I actually Googled baking apps and saw some on the App Store. I want to say to you, and something I'm telling myself, is that even if your problem is solved already, or you find apps that are similar to yours, don't let that stop you from trying to build something. Because one thing Yianna and I were talking about was you go into an app store, you find that app, and you see some of the comments that are talking shit about that app, people have had problems with that. That's an advantage for you. That's a point for you to kind of answer those problems that people are having with your own solution. So as a starting point, if you've got an idea, go and find some competitors, see what they're not really good at, and can you kind of hone in and make that your strong point. Next slide, please. So once you've done that and you've got your problem statement, write it down, talk about it as a team, bounce ideas off us as mentors. That's what we're here for. And start to think about brainstorm. This is the brainstorming session of how you're going to actually solve that problem. So for Loafly, I was like, okay, I need a journal, kind of like a journal in my app, and maybe some way to take photos so I can attach it to a journal entry of the bread. And maybe I want a timer in there because I don't want to have to switch apps to go to the iPhone clock. So this is your chance to kind of write down what features do you want in your application, whether it's a website or a mobile app. So next slide, please. Next step is the fun part, and what we'll get into soon is prototyping. So actually opening up, whether it be Figma or whatever your choice of tooling is to use, to start to actually put your ideas into like a physical form. And so rough wireframes are great if you can convey your idea. It doesn't have to be super high fidelity, and we'll show you some tools to get you started so you don't have to like design anything from scratch yourself. So next slide. Finally, the testing bit, and this is one of the most important steps, because remember that you are not your user. In the case of Loafly, I wanted to build this app for me, but when you're thinking about a problem and you design this thing that you think is awesome, as soon as you put it into someone else's hands, it might not make sense to them, right? Like they don't understand how to, use your application, what all the features are. So make sure you try and test it. And one thing that Yianna and I discussed is if you've got someone in your team that's good at selling, like posting on Twitter or posting on Discord, just say, hey, we've got an idea. We want to show it to someone and get their feedback. And I think a hackathon space is a great place to do that. So anyone like free to test our app, I'm around, Yianna's around, all of the mentors and organizers are. So please reach out if you need help with testing when you get to that stage. Yeah, so I think that's all I had for the design process. If you go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back. One quick thing I want to say, it's not always going to be linear like this and then you're done and then, you're going to make millions. I think it's going to be an iterative process, and it might not always be in this order. So once you test, you'll probably come back to prototype. You might come back to add more features and, ideate some more. So remember that it's a circle, it's a cycle.
Yeah, and I want to add with that as well as fail fast. Try out as many ideas as you can and you test them. You get your feedback loop, going quickly from the very beginning. A few years ago, I got a scholarship from uni and I went overseas to do a hackathon, and it was awesome. But the idea that we had was, why don't we use a Fitbit to track how many high fives we give people? So the technology part was one thing, but the actual user part was the biggest thing. The thing that we were trying to solve, the story that we were telling, is bringing the human element and that engagement and encouragement back into technology. So you're out for a run, you see someone and they're about to give you a high five. You're like, what the heck? Okay, cool. Like it pumps you up. It gets the energy going. And the way we initially even tested that idea before we'd even written anything to paper, we started running around the uni and giving people random high fives. We had people just observing, like, what were the reactions of these people before, after. We asked them, how did that make you feel? And that was getting really quick information so that we could fail fast or go forward with the idea.
Great point, Yianna, about validation, because that, if you're not sure about, is going to be problematic at every step of the way afterwards. So next slide, please, Jacqui. Thank you. That's it for all of our lecturing. We're at 2:37, so I'm going to say up front, I think we might go a bit over time, but would love for you to follow along in what we're going to do now, which is jump into Figma. So I'm going to share my screen. I hope that's not a problem for the recording. And I'm going to post a link to Figma if you haven't had a chance to sign up yet. And share my screen if I know how to do that. Okay, so Google is about to kick me out so I can actually update my system preferences, but this might give you a good time for everyone to set up their account. And I'm going to jump out of this call and then jump back in and we'll hop into Figma. So please stay. And I encourage also the organizers, if you're not too busy, I would love for you to join as well. So I'll be back.
Yeah, so Jacqui's going to demonstrate how to make loafly, but as you follow along, feel free to add your own flair to it as well. Like if you've got like a funny name in mind, or maybe you've got a name for your idea in mind, and maybe make some changes and adapt it to make it a bit more personal to you as well. In case you haven't got any ideas or anything like that, I've got some pinned things in the channel, the Discord channel. There's quite a lot of information there. And some of the ones you might want to use in Figma is there's a blush plugin. So blush, Jacqui will go through it as well. Feel free to share your screen. I'm just talking about the plugins. So I think Jacqui will demonstrate what that does a bit later. But there's also Material Design UI Kit. Check them both out.
Thanks, Yianna. So everyone, I hope, should have created a Figma account by now, and you can go to the Figma home screen. So everyone can see my screen. Okay, it's like, yes, great. Okay, cool. So what's the goal here? I'm just going to go. Should I show you this straight away or not? Okay. So the goal of our workshop is to get you going from, okay, thanks, Stephanie. And the goal of this workshop, I'll let Yianna answer that question from Juan, is to go from some basic wireframes to an interactive prototype. And this won't be exactly what you're building, but I'm going to show you like loafly what Figma is capable of doing. So you'll see I've got this prototype. They're just separate screens, and I can interact with it as if it were, you know, a real app. I can click in, click back, and so on. I think I can go to a few different screens. So that's kind of our goal. And I would say if that's what you've got working by the end of the hackathon, you don't want to write any code, that would be like a legit thing to show judges, because it conveys your idea just as well as, you know, a lot of written code behind the scenes would. So let's get started. I'm going to go back to files and just, yeah, go from the top, because you would be at this screen and you should be able to create, I can't see it myself right now, like a new design file. So please go in and click on that. And once you are, I'm using a bit of a different setup. I just want to use this screen. You should come to this screen. And the first thing we're going to do is start to build some screens. To do that, let's start with creating a frame. So in Figma, a frame kind of represents like a picture frame where all of your elements are going to live on. So think of it like a website page, or a, what's it called, like a mobile app screen. So if I click on this frame icon at the top left, you'll see on the right hand side we've got a few different like automatically generated sizes for different frames. So let's click on Android. We're going to do that one today. And what that will do, now we've got our frame, what I'm going to do is double click on the name over here. This is showing me all my layers, and just name that screen. And once you've done that, what I'm going to do is create two more frames, because I know I want to flow. So second one will be home screen. Finally, last one will be, this is going to be kind of like a loafly mock-up. So to create a frame, see the top left, you've got a few icons at the top. This one that looks like a little hash symbol represents a frame. So if you click on that, you've got your options for frames there.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Sorry, I missed that.
No worries. Happy to answer any questions as we go along. Cool. So I did the same thing twice, so I could create multiple frames. And again, I'm just double clicking so I can rename them to make it a bit clearer for later when we turn them into prototypes. Again, how I name them is just like double clicking name on the left-hand side. Whoops, just going to press delete. Awesome. Looks like you're going well, Juan. So we're done almost. Let's first of all create some text. So again, in the top panel where we've got our frames, we've got this little T that represents text. So I'm going to click on that and click somewhere within my splash screen like that. And I'm going to type in loafly. It's very small at the moment. So you should have a bit of text in your splash screen now. And if you look on the right-hand side, as you're selected on your text, you'll be able to bump this up to a better font. Let's make it 36, thinking about hierarchy, thinking about building visual hierarchy. We're going to make it big. This is our splash screen. It's only going to be there for a few seconds before our page loads. So if you've done that correctly, next we can start to think about wireframing what our home screen will look like. So I'm thinking about, what do I want this to be? A kind of navigation screen where my users can start to click into the journal, click into settings, for example. So to do that, to create a button, let's use the shapes rectangle. And I'm just going to click anywhere in my home screen, and it's going to create a 100 by 100 little rectangle. And I can resize that. So again, the rectangle. And let's put some text on it. So again, I'm clicking text, and I'll do bread journal. If I click away, I should be able to. So that text is massive still. So I'm going to bump it to 24. And if I center it, Figma's going to help me put it in the center of the screen as well. So awesome. So I've got this button. What I'm going to do is shift click, or actually no, I'll make it simple and like drag over both of these elements so that I can duplicate them. And it's same Command C, Command V for Figma as well. I can drag that along. I hope you can do the same. And you'll see Figma is really helpful in giving you like the pixel dimensions between each in pixels. And I'll make this, I'm just double clicking it and saying maybe settings. And I notice that's not centered, so I'll drag it. Maybe about loafly, if you want to read more about me. Awesome. Next, I'm going to just quickly create a new text thing saying like, I want my user to be welcomed. So, or like happy baking to myself at the top. Maybe they log in at some point. So just making a welcome screen, and I'll drag that down. So the text box, what I did to center it was just like drag it until you see that line that goes through the whole frame. And there's another way to do this if you want to center some text in the frame. Let's do that together. I'm going to bring it over here, and you'll see this icon align horizontal centers. Or just try clicking them all, what they do, and then you'll be like, okay, that does that. And then I can kind of drag it again and just make sure it's centered. And finally, again, I'm going to create a few more elements on the journal screen, some actual journal entries. So what I'll do is select all my buttons, Command C, Command V, and drag it into my journal screen, like so. And I'm just going to go journal entry. Maybe I want to know like the description of journal, just putting some dummy text in. Actually, what I'm going to do is copy this one and copy paste. What we'll do as well is create a video of this, of us going through this. So if you miss something along the way, you can step back, but that will be shared in the next few days, so not straight away. One more thing I'd like to do is put a little title at the top, because I want people to know this is a journal screen, and a little back button. So just wait. So looking good, like we're getting an idea for what this app is going to start to look like. Play around with, you know, maybe you want icons, that kind of thing. But if everyone's up to this stage, or you have at least a few pages, what we're going to do now is start to make these pages interact. And how do we do that? You see on the top right, we've got design, prototype, and inspect. So we've been in the design mode to allow us to create all these different, design elements. Inspect is a cool one. It actually gives you some of the CSS, so you can actually pull that straight into your app if you're doing web development. So that if I click on something, it'll tell me the exact height, width, so on. That'll be helpful for the web developers. But the one we want to use is prototype. So this brings us into a special mode where we can make this an interactive app. So I click on prototype here. And now if I click on any title of all my screens, you'll see there's a little circle, and that represents like the interaction or the connection. And so if I click on this circle and drag it, so I'm dragging this, you'll see it's got a little arrow, and that's showing that this screen, splash screen, will go to this home screen. And as soon as I do that, I get a little pop-up saying interaction details. And maybe you lost that by accident, but if you click back on the arrow that you created, you'll have the interaction details again. So for this splash to home screen, I want it to like fade in. I don't want the user to have to like click and then they go to the home screen. I'm going to, instead of on tap, use after delay. And that gives me like, okay, how long is it going to be after the delay? I'm just going to say 2000 milliseconds or 2 seconds. So just to go over it again, how to create that flow. You've been in design mode, creating some elements. Click on prototype. And as soon as I created this arrow from splash screen to home screen, the little flow will pop up on the top left, kind of indicating that you're starting to build this like interaction flow. You'll see them. So again, I'm clicking on prototype. You'll see them here too as well. Awesome. So once you've created that flow, let's do another flow from the button, the bread journal button. So click on that and drag to this screen, because I want the bread journal to actually go to the journal screen. And I know now that I do want it to be a tap. And I want my animation, up to you, but let's make it kind of like idiomatic of a mobile app. Let's make it a push. So you'll see Figma actually shows you what the animation looks like, which is really cool. So we can see this screen will push onto this one like a stack. Finally, let's make the home button go back to the home screen. And again, I'm going to do on tap, push. This time I'm going to use that right hand push. So it kind of like pops off again. We'll see it when we look at the prototype. And everything else looks fine. It's like the animation, and 300 milliseconds sounds good. So if you've gotten to this stage, you've got a flow splash screen going to home screen, button, bread journal going to the journal, and home button going back home so we can. Awesome. So if that's all good, feel free to ask any questions if you got stuck along the way. Once we've done that, we can click on this play button, the present, and that's going to open our app. So you'll see we've got a prototype working. So if I press anywhere over here, so again, I'm just going to show you again, that was the play button up top. If I click anywhere, you'll see you've got some options for like restart. So if I press R, you'll see it'll show the splash screen again and then go to the home screen. And for some reason, I'm just going to really check really quickly why doesn't that dissolve. I'm going to refresh. Nice, looks good. And if I click anywhere, you'll see there's like a little blue signifying that that's a button. So I can click. And it looks like an app. Like I always get impressed when it does the push, and you'll see we can go back to. So yeah, like I would say that's a good starting point for actually something to demo as well. And I hope you got to this stage, because you can do exactly the same thing for like a website, right? Like if you're building a website, you can go through the same process. How did everyone go? Did you get this far?
I'm still making my buttons. I'm trying to do like the oh wait, I've named my screens wrong. I realized
Okay.
I got my splash screen and my journal screen the wrong way around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've never
Yeah.
done any like UX UI before. I mean,
No
not like
problem.
this. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
all
this
good.
is new. Figure's very new to me.
Figma is definitely like, you know, it used to be like Photoshop, Illustrator, all these quite like complex to learn UIs. But I would say Figma has really simplified the process. So if you do need to go back and like go over it again, I will post the video probably tomorrow if you want to go through this process. And there's, you know, videos online to do the same. What I want to show you now is we're almost at 3 o'clock. So if you need to drop off, please go ahead. But I do want to uplift this with, you know, some styles, show you where you can get some illustrations from, and even a logo as well, if that's something you need. So the first thing I'm going to do, thank you to Yianna who showed this. It is called Shadforth.com. So what this does is it gives you a way to generate a logo really easily without having to do the hard work yourself. If you just need something for a prototype, or even you could use it legitimately. So what we're going to do is we click on Get Started, and it says choose your business space. So for loafly, I'm going to pick food and drink, and I'm going to press next. And next it says choose your visual style. So depending on the kind of brand you're building, you might choose modern, friendly, reliable. I've selected, oh, it's already got it there for me, natural, strong, and vintage. That definitely sounds like me. So if I go in next, oh, it's actually got it from last time when I tested this out. That's handy. Business name, loafly, slogan, slice of life. And tell us where the logo will be used. Pick what is suitable for you. I've chosen online store or website. And yeah, these are the kind of logos that came up with, which gives me a good starting point to like use these colors for my brand and use these colors for the app. Let's go with this one. That one looks edgy. If I go edit logo, and one thing I want to do is just change the icon so I can go here. Food. I know how to croissant. So, and font, again, I'm thinking serif font looks kind of like homely. Oh, that one's close to what I was using. Yeah. So what I'll do for this, if you go next, it gives you the option to download your logo in all the different formats. In this case, please go ahead if you need to do this, but I think you need an account, which is a little bit annoying. For this, I'm just going to screenshot that part because I know I just want the logo. I come back into Figma and drag that in from my desktop. And now, if I come back into design and just start to click on the splash screen, I will change the fill of this screen, the background, to that color. So I'm just using I clicked on fill down here. I clicked on that little color picker and I'm just going to select that color. Nice. So again, I'm just going to click on home screen, fill, color picker. This is quite a strong color, but let's just roll with it for now. And I will start to press shift and select all my buttons. And up the top here, I've got like corner radius, so I can actually make it a bit more stylish. I'll make that 10, which makes all the borders a bit rounded. And what I'll do is select them all, fill, and I will drag this circle to make it like a shade. Okay, let's go with that. That yellow is quite harsh. Maybe I'll switch it up and actually do the opposite. So this is kind of the process I go through, right? Is just playing around, seeing what works for you. This, I probably wouldn't stick to this yellow. It's quite strong, but just to show you what you can do with Figma, it is quite powerful. And again, these fonts, I'm just going to shift click on them all. I'm sure there's an easy way to do this, but I don't know the shortcut. And change the font to, I know I like to use Nanito. So I've added some style. Finally, I wanted to show you an image library. If we go back, so I click the top right and I go back to files on Figma, so that little icon, and I click on community. So I'm just going to share this link in case you can't get there yourself. This is where you can download plugins, and it's quite a powerful tool. People are building things open source, right? So the plugin that Yianna showed me that blew my mind was called, I think it's called Blush. Is that right, Yianna?
Yeah, that's the one.
So yeah, awesome. So if you search for Blush in the community mode, I can even share you a link to make it easy. And click on plugins here. This plugin will give you illustrations for free and customize them as well. So you don't need to like design your own illustrations in Illustrator. So I've already installed it, but you should see an install button on the right-hand side of your screen. So once you've installed that, and we go back to the main screen again, so I click on the home icon or the little globe, go back to my account. I can go back into Loafly. So double clicking on my project, and where are we? So I'm back in Loafly, and if I right click anywhere, I've got this menu and I click on plugins, then Blush. That's what we just installed. What pops up is a little modal of illustrations that we can customize. So I'm going to choose like a person that I want on the home screen as like a way to like introduce the user. This one kind of looks like my style. Click on one, maybe like sitting on standing, sure. So I click on that. And behind this modal is the image that's being created. But what you can do, which is really powerful, is like create a custom like icon for that's unique to your application. So I'm going to do, oh yeah, there's like a pancake or cake. Yeah, there's no bread, unfortunately. Yeah, I like her skin. And once that's done, if I just close this window, it's already appeared back here. Oh, she's got a beard. And I can start to drag that around and resize it. Okay, the balloon's a bit annoying, but anyway. So yeah, like that's one of the tools that you can use to bring in illustrations and really spice up your design. Maybe she goes on the, home screen, something like that. So sure, let's keep it like that. So yeah, like coming back to this, I'll press R again, and you've got like an app that looks pretty good for like a hackathon, I would say. And it's interactive. Start to build out more screens probably, and yeah, you have something to demo by the end of it. And you didn't write a line of code, you didn't write a line of CSS, so that makes me happy. So I think that's it for the workshop. Actually, if you got to this point.
I loved your app. I sort of did a derivation. Could I show what I created?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. I love loafly. I don't know if anybody else bakes, but yeah, I used to bake quite a lot, and I've got a few friends that are bakers as well. So it's pretty cool. I'd love to use it sometime.
For sure, I'll put it on the store.
Oh no, now I have to open my system preferences. Oh, this is annoying. That's all right. We'd also love to see what you created, but feel free to show us.
Oh, that was a mic drop. But yeah, if you got to work through this exercise, would love to see if you got to create anything in the channel. Please share. I'll share this link as well to what I've created, and we'll give Yianna some time to show.
Sorry about that. No, I'm back. I'll show everyone. I'll share people to my app. That's all good. I think we've gone over time. I just checked it now as well. I'm all good. But thanks so much for that, Jacqui. That was awesome. I love seeing the prototype come together.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming along, sticking around. I know, sorry, it did go over time by a bit, but yeah, we hope you got something out of it, and have a go at Figma. I think it's one of the not up and coming. It's actually one of the main tools we use in industry now as well. So, hey, Melindy and friends.
Oh, that's Cheryl from GDSC as well. She just
hey, she just popped in.
Yeah. Done then. I'm gonna stop the recording. Yeah. Curious.
Perfect. Thank you.
Woo.
Oh, the socials?
Oh, so I think we did share them. Yeah, if you want to connect with us on any of the socials. I think I'm only on LinkedIn, but Yianna, I'm not sure if there are. Twitter, Punk Fairy Bread, which is such an awesome username. I will share mine as well.
Also, in terms of the recording, it will be updated on the same link that you guys used to access the web, like the Google Meet. So on the same event that you RSVP'd, you'll be able to see it in like 30 minutes or so, because this takes a little bit of time to process. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna stop.
Hope you all had fun.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.